Loving our neighbors, it's hard. It may be one of the most complicated things that we're asked to do as Christians. Why? Because we really don't want to do it. I mean, it's easy to love those who benefit us or love us back in return. I mean, it's quite wonderful. But what about those who don't do any of that? They're just there, next to us, sharing space. They have no benefit to us at all, actually, and we have no benefit to them. Even if they got to know us, we still wouldn't bring anything to the table that they need. So, how do we treat those people? This is when loving your neighbor becomes hard, because we're called to wish them well, even the cantankerous ones. One of my first years of pastoring, I was forced into an unwanted altercation with a church member, and he was quite cantankerous. He challenged everything anyone did all the time. I mean, I think his spiritual gift was to be uncooperative as much as possible, and it wasn't with just me, it was with everybody and everything. I don't even really remember why he was so mad. He just always was against whatever was going on. Regardless of him or his actions, I think about him from time to time. He sits in my mind like an archetype of the people that we're supposed to love, even when it's hard. I learned from that encounter that people who come at you in life like a bully, who are forceful and uncooperative, and they're unconscious of their actions, that I've learned you can't match their fever pitch, and you don't give in either. And that's how you handle passive aggressiveness too. You don't back down, and you don't fight back. You let their anger sit as long as it needs to. And when you do engage them, you bless them. But it takes work to engage an unconscious, cantankerous neighbor. It's exhausting, actually. And if you've ever stopped to think, though, so are you to them. That's probably even more difficult to consider, that you're hard for them. But unless we're able to self-reflect at that level, then we're just as unconscious to our neighboring as they are. And I think this is what ultimately makes neighboring so difficult. It forces us to put a spotlight back on us. It shows us our flaws. And if we're conscious to them, we can make changes. It does make us ask ourselves, why did we say that to our neighbor? Why did I just lead with that story? Do they think I'm conceited now? Am I just as pessimistic now? Why did I one up their story? Why did I do all that? And this level of emotional work, that's exhausting too. And because we all know when we put the spotlight back on us, we got some things that need to be changed. I was introduced to a relationship theory years ago that came from the Gottman Institute, which is just a fabulous resource for family and marriage therapy and healthy relationship practices. The theory is called bidding. I talk to all our couples that I do premarital counseling with about this concept, and you may have heard it before too. We bid for others' attention constantly. I'm bidding for yours right now, and there's one of three ways that a person responds to a bid. They turn towards you, against you, or away from you. The most healthy responses to a bid is turning towards. This is vital for marriages and friendships and parenting. If someone bids for your attention, you turn towards it. You stop what you're doing and you listen. You give your attention. You affirm them with your time. And the next best response, although it's not great, is you turn against them. Someone bids for your time and you lean into their bid, but you're not nice. You're nasty. Your wife asks, "What do you want for dinner?" And you respond, "You literally ask me that every day. I don't care." Being argumentative, abrupt, loud, overbearing, these are all signs that you're turning towards your partner, but not out of love. Conflict starts here between people at this level. But it's at least better than the last one, which is turning away. An example of this would be your husband washes the dishes without being asked and then turns to you with a smile on his face like he has just solved a Rubik's Cube for the first time and he wants to be celebrated. But all you do is roll your eyes as you walk through the kitchen, hardly acknowledging the effort even took place. You have turned away. You're not mad. You're indifferent. Now that's the worst. There's a tremendous amount more that we could be saying about bidding and examples we could give for hours. But for now, let me tie this together. Neighboring is so hard because we engage in others' bids. It's really easy to turn away from our neighbors. It's even safer at times probably, or it feels that way. Your neighbor is watering the flower and waves. They bid for your attention, but next to the flowers, there's a sponsored political sign of a person you didn't vote for. So you keep walking, pretending the sun's in your face and you don't see them waving. You may even turn against your neighbor. SEC fans are not afraid to turn against you because of a bumper sticker that you have or a hat that you wear. If you're an Auburn fan and you ever meet an Alabama fan, it is on like Donkey Kong, which is funny, but there are far worse examples of this too. I'm sure you've seen videos of a lady in a restaurant with a head covering being harassed. Do you remember the video that came out right at the beginning of COVID of people screaming at each other in Old Navy because they were being asked to wear a mask? The lady, I remember, dumped her entire cart of stuff on the floor and stormed out. It doesn't take much for neighbors to turn against neighbors or even to turn away from them. And it's usually such a deeply unconscious act when it happens. Now, this concept of bidding, it matters to me because it's a direct concert in how we neighbor. How do we hold what others bring us? What is it that we're asking others to hold when we go to them? What is our initial response when something catches us off guard? It needs to be love. Now that doesn't mean you let someone bulldoze you. No, you don't match their fever pitch and you don't back down. Love can mean standing your ground at times, but it also means turning towards them. Now, this isn't just a nice cognitive behavioral lesson. This fits squarely into our biblical text today. It's the call of the disciples to come and follow Jesus, and there's a lot of bidding going on. Let's jump into the story in verse 43. The next day, Jesus decided to go to Galilee. He found Philip and said to him, "Follow me." This is our first bid. And Philip turns toward Jesus. He leans into the story, and it progresses, which is a neat way to think about this story. Ultimately, this is one about the disciples choosing to become disciples. They know very little about Jesus, but they open themselves up to being a good neighbor. They turn towards Jesus, and it changes everything for them. Now imagine that. By turning towards someone, your life can change for the better in ways you'd never be able to imagine otherwise. Look at verse 44. Philip was from Bethsaida, the city of Andrew and Peter. Philip found Nathanael and said to him, "We have found him, about whom Moses in the law and also the prophets wrote, Jesus, son of Joseph from Nazareth." This is our second bid. This time it's Philip bidding to Nathanael. But Nathanael doesn't turn towards Philip like Philip does Jesus. Watch what happens in verse 46. Nathanael says to him, being Philip, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" This is not a compliment. Nathanael turns against Philip's bid. He's dismissive. He even takes a jab at Jesus' home place, ridiculing him from being from a small town, disparaging his upbringing, his neighbors, and his neighborhood. He's being cantankerous. This might have been a simple, unconscious act by Nathanael, but look at the energy that it creates. It sends ripple effects into the conversation. If Philip would have been an unconscious character himself, he might have taken the attack personally, turned away from Nathanael or even against him. And Nathanael never would have been introduced to Christ. And he never would have been a disciple. And he would have just stayed the same old cantankerous soul for the rest of his life. Thankfully, Philip isn't unconscious. He doesn't fight back and he doesn't give in. Instead, he turns towards Nathanael again in love. And he says, well, if you change your mind, come and see. And Nathanael does. Because Philip turns towards him twice, encouraging and blessing and welcoming and inviting, Nathanael's life changes for the better. He becomes a disciple. What I see happening here is that because Philip turns towards Nathanael, and he's conscious of his actions. He doesn't overreact to the cantankerousness of Nathanael. And there's so much good and change that comes of it because of this. If Philip would not have been a conscious character, able to withstand Nathanael's anger, this story would have ended differently. I wonder how many of our relationships would have ended differently if we could have been better, if we would have taken the time to self-reflect, if we could have been a better neighbor. I think about this in light of all that's happened in our world over the last week. What's been happening in our world for years. We have got to be better neighbors. We have got to be able to show love to people, even the cantankerous ones.